King Charles's private meeting with Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, Archie, and Lilibet has already been described as evidence of a palace lie. The accusation sounds simple. Charles was carrying out public engagements in Oxfordshire. Harry was appearing at an Invictus event in Birmingham. Buckingham Palace later confirmed that the family met at Highgrove, while separate reports placed the private reunion on Friday afternoon. Critics then pointed to the travel times, an alleged email and a later account involving a Chanel event at Highgrove, and said the official story had collapsed. But before anyone calls this proof of deception, one distinction matters. The palace confirmed that a meeting happened. It did not publish the detailed minute-by-minute journey now being attacked. Much of that chronology appeared later through press reports, anonymous sources, and commentary. The real question is not whether the public timeline contains gaps. It does. The question is, who filled those gaps, what evidence they used, and whether an incomplete record has been turned into a complete verdict against both the palace and Meghan. The public version was emotionally powerful because it offered something royal watchers had not seen for years. King Charles had reportedly reunited with Harry, Meghan, and the children at Highgrove in a private family setting. For some, it looked like a breakthrough after years of estrangement, legal conflict, public interviews, and arguments over security. For others, it immediately looked suspicious. The meeting was private. There were no official photographs. The children were not brought before cameras. The palace released very little detail. That silence protected the family from spectacle, but it also created a vacuum. Once the official record stopped, newspapers, commentators, and online channels began supplying the missing route, the missing timing, the missing motive, and eventually the missing villain. That is how the story moved from a confirmed family meeting to a claim that Meghan had forced the palace into a false narrative. The strongest version of that accusation rests on three separate pieces. First, the public schedules of Charles and Harry. Second, later reporting that traffic connected with the Chanel event may have helped the Sussex family enter Highgrove without attracting attention. Third, an alleged email said to involve photographs and a magazine inquiry. Each piece deserves examination. None should be dismissed merely because it is inconvenient, but each has a different level of reliability, and treating them as though they carry the same evidentiary weight is where the story begins to distort. The strongest receipt is the official confirmation. Buckingham Palace confirmed that the meeting took place at Highgrove. That establishes the event, the location, and the people said to have attended. It does not establish an exact starting time, an exact ending time, the route taken by either party, or the internal reason the palace chose to confirm it. Those missing details matter because the accusation of a lie depends on precision. A general confirmation of a family meeting cannot be disproved merely by presenting public engagements that occurred on the same day. To prove impossibility, the record would need verified departure times, verified arrival times, and a clearly sourced meeting time that could not fit between them. The second strong receipt is the court circular. It confirms that King Charles carried out a series of public engagements in Oxfordshire that day. He visited the Stephen A. Schwarzman Center at the University of Oxford, attended further engagements, and later went to the Harwell Space Cluster. The court circular is valuable because it is an official public record, but it is not a transport log. It tells the public where the king carried out duties and in what broad order. It does not give the exact minute he left each location, the route he took afterward, or the time he returned to Highgrove. The record therefore places pressure on the timeline without completing the calculation. Harry's appearance in Birmingham is also confirmed. He attended an Invictus-related event at the National Exhibition Center. Images and reporting place him there during the day. That is not in dispute. What remains less clear is the exact minute he left, whether he departed immediately after the public portion of the event, and what transport arrangements were already in place. Those details are not minor. They mark the difference between saying the schedule looks tight and saying it was physically impossible. A tight schedule may justify questions. It does not automatically establish deception. This is the first major reversal in the story. The timeline being described as destroyed may never have been a complete official timeline in the first place. The palace confirmed a meeting. The court circular confirmed Charles's public duties. Public reporting confirmed Harry's appearance in Birmingham. The detailed route between those points was largely reconstructed afterward. Once that distinction is clear, the accusation changes. We are no longer testing whether a minute-by-minute palace statement was false. We are testing whether a chronology assembled through later reporting is internally consistent. That does not make the questions illegitimate. It puts them in the right category. If one report suggested the meeting began at a time when Harry could still be shown in Birmingham, that report should be examined. If another placed Charles too far away to arrive when claimed, that should also be scrutinized, but the source of each time matters. Was it a palace statement, an eyewitness, a pool report, a named journalist, an anonymous source, or an assumption based on ordinary travel time? A contradiction between two official records would be serious. A contradiction between an official record and an anonymously sourced reconstruction may expose weak reporting rather than a deliberate institutional lie. The Chanel detail is a good example. A later account, attributed to an unnamed source quoted by the Mail on Sunday, claimed that vehicles arriving for a Chanel event allowed the Sussex family's car to blend into the traffic around Highgrove. It is a vivid explanation because it makes the meeting sound like a carefully managed operation. It also appears to solve one problem in the public story: how a high-profile family entered a royal residence without clear photographs appearing immediately. But that detail was not part of the original palace confirmation. It emerged through later, anonymously sourced reporting. It may be accurate. It may reflect a genuine security arrangement. It may also be incomplete. What it cannot automatically be called is a revised official timeline. This difference is essential because the accusation against the palace depends on the idea that officials first gave one version and then replaced it with another. To establish that, the public would need to see the original wording, the later wording, and the exact point of contradiction. Without two conflicting official statements, what may have changed was not the palace record, but the media narrative around it. One outlet may have supplied an early estimate. Another may have added a source-based explanation. A commentator may then have treated the second report as proof that the first was false. That chain can create the appearance of a cover story, even when the institution itself never published either detailed version. The alleged email is the most dramatic part of the accusation and the weakest receipt currently available to the audience. It has been described as communication from a magazine involving possible photographs and concern about the palace's reaction. If authentic and complete, such an email could be important. It might show that a publication was offered material, that editors sought verification, or that palace officials were asked to comment. But an email is only as strong as its source chain. The public has not been shown enough to verify the sender, the full headers, the attachments, the original timestamp, the identity of the publication, or any response from Buckingham Palace. Even if authentic, the email would not by itself identify Meghan as the source, authenticate the photographs, or establish that Charles and Camilla were photographed without their knowledge. It would not establish that the palace issued a confirmation because a magazine had made contact or that any privacy warning had been sent. Each of those conclusions requires an additional evidentiary link. Without that link, the email may justify further investigation, but it cannot yet carry the much larger accusation placed upon it. This is where the evidence question becomes a reputation question. Meghan is placed at the center of the accusation. Even though the confirmed communication came from a Buckingham Palace, the public travel involved Harry and Charles, and any security arrangements would have involved staff around the family. A question about the king's schedule and Harry's journey becomes a verdict about Meghan's motives. Yet the available record does not show that she controlled the palace statement, the timing of Harry's departure, the movement of royal vehicles, or the editorial decisions of a magazine. That does not mean Meghan should be protected from legitimate scrutiny. If reliable evidence connects her to a photo offer, it should be examined directly. If a verified email shows that her representatives approached a publication, the significance should be assessed. But the standard cannot change because the public already has strong opinions about her. Her past controversies cannot authenticate a new document. A pause in social media activity cannot become a verified travel record. Suspicion may explain why people look closely, but it cannot replace the evidentiary connection still required. The pattern is familiar far beyond royal life. A wife becomes the explanation for decisions made by her husband, his family, their staff, and the institutions surrounding them. Harry is an adult who attended the Birmingham event. Charles is the monarch whose household managed the confirmation. Palace staff handle communications. Security professionals manage access. Editors decide whether material is publishable. Yet the accusation can travel through all those people and land almost entirely on Meghan. That may eventually be supported by evidence, but at present it looks more like a familiar narrative habit than a verified chain of responsibility. The strongest counter case is straightforward. Charles and Harry completed their public duties, traveled to Highgrove, and joined a private family meeting that the palace later confirmed. The exact timings were kept out of the official statement because the meeting involved family privacy and security. Traffic connected with another event may have made discreet access easier. Under this explanation, there is no need for a fabricated meeting or a palace cover story. There is only a tightly managed private visit, followed by limited confirmation. That counter case is plausible, but it is not complete. The exact movement of both men remains unclear. The public does not have a verified event in time for Harry, a verified departure time for Charles, or an official meeting start time. A private meeting can be real, while the press chronology surrounding it is wrong. The strongest defense of the meeting does not require every newspaper detail to be accurate. It requires only enough time for the participants to reach Highgrove after their public duties. Until the missing timestamps are established, that explanation remains plausible rather than fully proven. The strongest case for skepticism is also narrower than the loudest headlines suggest. The schedules appear compressed. Later reports may not fit neatly together. The public was given minimal official information. An alleged email introduced the possibility that photographs were being discussed before or around the time of confirmation. Those points justify asking who knew what and when. They justify requesting the original palace communication, complete event schedules, and the full alleged email. They do not establish that the meeting never occurred or that officials knowingly issued a false statement. What is striking is that both sides are using the same missing hours. Critics fill the gap with a cover story. Supporters fill it with a perfectly organized reunion. The gap is real, but neither interpretation becomes fact merely because it matches an existing belief. This is why source discipline matters. When a story is emotionally charged, people often treat the explanation they prefer as the one the evidence must support. A responsible verdict has to work in the opposite direction. The conclusion must remain narrower than the receipt, until the receipt earns something larger. The way the story has been controlled is almost as important as the timeline itself. Buckingham Palace controlled the official confirmation and released very little. Newspapers controlled the later logistics. Anonymous sources supplied color and timing. Commentators controlled the interpretation. The person holding the alleged email controlled how much of it the audience was allowed to see. Meghan became the subject of the accusation, but she did not control the record being used to judge her. This does not establish that she had no role. It explains why the public should be cautious about assigning one before the source chain becomes visible. The palace's limited confirmation may have protected the family's privacy, but it also created an information vacuum. Institutions often prefer silence because every additional detail produces another headline. In this case, silence reduced official exposure while increasing unofficial speculation. Once the palace declined to provide a full chronology, other people were free to supply one. That decision may have been understandable, especially where children and security were involved. It also carried a reputation cost. Privacy protected the meeting, but weakened the institution's control over the story. The children should not be used to intensify the accusation. Their presence was part of the reported meeting, but they are not public evidence to be tested through photographs, social media appearances, or speculation about family life. A private family meeting involving children is not suspicious merely because the public was not given images. Privacy and deception are not the same thing. The absence of photographs can create uncertainty, but it cannot establish that an event was invented. Any serious investigation has to keep the adult's claims separate from the children's right not to become evidence in a public argument. There is also a difference between a photograph existing and a photograph being offered for commercial publication. A private image could have been taken by staff, family members, or an authorized photographer. A publication could inquire about an image without ever receiving it. A legal team could ask the palace for comment as a routine precaution. None of those possibilities establishes wrongdoing. To move from an email inquiry to a claim that Meghan secretly photographed the king and attempted to sell the material requires evidence of origin, ownership, intent, and action. At present, those links remain unverified. This is why the main accusation should be broken into smaller questions. Did the meeting occur? Buckingham Palace confirmed that it did, and multiple reputable outlets reported that confirmation. Were Charles and Harry publicly elsewhere earlier that day? Yes. Does the available record contain every time required to test the journey? No. Did later reports provide a more detailed logistics story? Yes. Did the palace officially replace one precise timeline with another? That has not been demonstrated. Does the alleged email prove Meghan arranged a photo deal? Not on the material publicly available. Once those questions are separated, the headline looks much larger than the evidence. Timeline destroyed suggests that an official chronology has been disproved. Palace crisis suggests institutional panic supported by direct reporting. Why lie? Assumes both the motive and the offense before the record is tested. The evidence supports a more careful conclusion. There is a genuine gap in the public timetable. There is inconsistent or incomplete media reporting around the logistics. There is an alleged email whose integrity cannot yet be assessed. There is not yet proof of a deliberate palace lie. The most useful new detail would not be another anonymous quote. It would be an original record. The palace press email could show the exact wording and timestamp of the confirmation. The Birmingham event schedule could show when Harry's public duties ended. Pool footage or transport records could establish his departure window. The Harwell media schedule could narrow Charles's movement. The full email could reveal the publication, sender, attachments, and whether the palace responded. Those are the receipts that could move the story forward. Repeating the accusation more loudly cannot make the record more complete. There is another reason this distinction matters to a mature audience. Royal stories often arrive as finished moral dramas before the source material is available. One person is cast as loyal, another as manipulative, and an institution is either protecting the family or deceiving the public. That structure is emotionally efficient. It gives viewers a side to choose before they have to examine the record. But this case resists that simplicity. The palace may have protected privacy while communicating too little. The press may have uncovered useful logistical details while overstating their certainty. Meghan may have participated in decisions around the visit without being the source of the alleged email or photographs. Harry may have wanted family access while also maintaining control over publicity. Several of those things could be true at the same time. Evidence analysis becomes valuable precisely when the people involved are complicated enough that a single villain cannot explain every decision. The final reputation question is not whether Meghan is liked. It is whether evidence standards should change according to the person being accused. A missing time may justify investigation. It does not automatically justify a character verdict. An unauthenticated document may deserve examination. It does not automatically identify the person behind it. A private family meeting may be managed carefully. That does not make it false, and a woman who has previously fought public battles with the palace is not automatically responsible for every new communication problem involving her husband and his family. The same fairness should apply to Buckingham Palace. An institution known for strategic silence should not be treated as fully transparent simply because it issued a confirmation. The palace could reduce much of the speculation by releasing a clearer chronology, but it may decide that family privacy and security are more important. That decision is open to criticism. It is not proof of fabrication. Royal institutions should be questioned, especially when their statements shape public understanding. But skepticism is strongest when it separates what officials actually said from what others later said on their behalf. So what does the record currently prove? Buckingham Palace confirmed a private Highgrove meeting involving King Charles, Queen Camilla, Prince Harry, Meghan, and the children. Charles and Harry also carried out separate public engagements earlier that day. The public record does not provide every departure and arrival time needed for a complete reconstruction. What is credibly reported? The reunion was treated as a private family occasion, and no official photographs or extensive additional details were expected to be released. A separate account attributed to an unnamed source claimed that traffic connected with a Chanel event helped conceal the family's arrival, but that logistical detail has not been independently confirmed. What is disputed? The exact timing, the route taken by each party, whether later reports represent a changed account, and whether the logistics described through anonymous sources are complete. Those questions remain open because the underlying timestamps have not been fully published. What remains unknown? The authenticity and complete context of the alleged email, whether photographs were offered, who supplied them if they existed, whether Buckingham Palace received the same inquiry, and why the confirmation was issued when it was. Those are not minor details. They are the links required to move from suspicion to responsibility. And what did the headline exaggerate? The available evidence does not establish that Buckingham Palace lied, that the Highgrove meeting was invented, or that Meghan forced the institution into a secret photo cover story. The timeline may contain a genuine gap. The press may have filled that gap with details that do not perfectly align. But a gap is not the same thing as proof, and an incomplete receipt is not a complete public verdict. The Highgrove meeting may eventually prove to have been more carefully staged, more complicated, or more commercially sensitive than the first confirmation suggested. New records could change the assessment. If they do, they should be tested with the same discipline. Until then, the strongest conclusion is also the narrowest one. The meeting is confirmed. The public chronology is incomplete. The detailed media timeline remains partly sourced through reports rather than official records. The alleged email is not strong enough to establish Meghan's involvement in a photo deal. And the accusation of a palace lie has not yet earned the certainty of the headline. The question for viewers is not simply whether they trust Meghan or Buckingham Palace. It is whether missing hours and an unseen email are enough to justify a complete verdict about deception. Does this record support the accusation, or have privacy, incomplete reporting, and existing suspicion been combined into a story the evidence still cannot fully prove?